divide, add, subtract, easy as that. Use PEMDAS to get it right. Parentheses, exponents, multiply, divide, add, subtract, easy as that. Use PEMDAS to get it right.
Hello and welcome to the Kearney Math Show. Thank you all for tuning in today. On today's episode of the Kearney Math Show, we are going to be featuring mini lesson 1, evaluating expressions. But before we get started, if you will write entry number 1 at the top of your mini lesson. Okay, so our learning goals for today, before we leave today, I want you guys to be able to tell me what are numerical and variable expressions, and then be able to explain to me how to evaluate them. Okay, so we're going to dive right in with some vocabulary. So just think of some things around you that change. Can you think of anything that changes? So for me, some things that I automatically think of is I think about the weather is something that varies. Every day I wake up, it may be cold, it may be hot. Living in North Carolina, we never know. The weather varies. Something else that varies is maybe your height, depending on how old you are. And your genetic makeup, your height varies. Everyone's height is different. Okay, so something else that may vary is how much money you have. Some people spend a lot, you may save a lot. So your money is something that's constantly changing or varying. Okay, so if you hear what I keep saying over and over, and all of those is something that's called vary. And if we take that and we look at the math word that goes with that, variable, the root word there is vary. And vary means to change, okay? So a variable could change. So a variable is a letter or symbol that holds the place of a number, okay? For example, it could be A, X, M, and those could vary. So sometimes X may equal 3, whereas other times X may equal -5. Okay, so a variable is a letter or symbol, and they stand for all different kinds of numbers. They vary. Okay, now if we talk about the exact opposite of something that varies, we talk about something that stays the same, something that remains constant. So think about something that may stay the same. For me, something that stays the same is maybe the location of our school. Okay, no matter what kind of day we're having, if it's rainy outside, if the weather's changing, our location of our school is something that remains constant. So location of ALS. Okay. Something else that may remain constant is, let's say, the number 5. Okay. The number 5 is always going to be equal to the number 5. We're never going to say, hey, 5 is now equal to -12. So something that remains constant is just a number by itself. So we could say 5 or any other number. Okay, and I'm sure you can think of other things. So for that, you keep hearing me say the word constant. So our math word there is, instead of something we said earlier, a variable is something that changes, a constant remains the same. So a constant is a number that does not change. So I'm right here. Okay, for example, 9 is always going to equal 9. 12 is always going to equal 12. So a number that's by itself is a constant. Okay, so we could put that number by itself is a constant. Okay, it's not going to change. Okay, now if we were to put some of these things together, we'd have different expressions. So there are 2 types of expressions that you may see, a numerical expression and a variable expression. So when you hear the word numerical expression, what word comes to mind? So a numerical expression, it sounds like number, doesn't it? And that's exactly what it is. A numerical expression contains numbers and operations. Okay, so here are some examples. 13 plus 4. That is a numerical expression because it has numbers and it has operations. It has that addition in there. Or the next one, 5 times 2 minus 6. That's another numerical expression because it has numbers and operations. Okay, now if we were to take it a step further and talk about a variable expression, what do you think a variable expression has in it that maybe a numerical expression did not have? That's right, it has a variable. So a variable expression contains numbers. Oh, let's start with variables since that's a big difference. So variables, and it still has numbers and operations. The difference there is it has variables. So an example, you have an example right here. 3m plus 7. Okay, that's got some variables and it's got numbers and it has operations. Okay, now as you go through these, you're going to see some operations maybe symbolized in different ways. So I want to make sure that we understand what operations we see through multiplication and division. Okay, so what are some ways that we have typically seen multiplication shown in maybe either a numerical expression or a variable expression? So if you see multiplication, when you first started learning to multiply, you probably saw the X, the little times, okay? And then maybe later you learned that the little dot was multiplication. And now as we're getting into higher levels of math, you're going to start moving away from those, because why do you think we may not want to use the X for multiplication anymore? That's right, because we might get it confused with a variable, okay? So you're going to start seeing multiplication written in the form of a coefficient multiplied by a letter. So if you have 3m, if they're directly beside each other, then they are being multiplied, okay? So a letter and a number directly or anything directly beside each other, that is understood to be multiplication, okay? And then let's say that sometimes you may have a negative. So let's say the m is negative, then in that case we might decide to put parentheses, okay? Or just sometimes we may have parentheses, just like 3 times m, okay? So some forms that you may see multiplication is the X, the dot, beside each other, or parentheses, okay? And then division, when you first learned to divide, you probably saw division using that old school division symbol, okay? Other ways that we're going to transition into seeing division is you're going to see it written as a fraction. So maybe m divided by 3, or you may see a slash, m divided by 3, okay? The ways that you're going to more regularly see multiplication division is in those forms, either the multiplication right beside each other and division in a fraction form, okay? So now, we said all of that so that we could actually do some math. So let's dive in and do some math, okay? So we want to actually do something with these variable and numerical expressions. And one thing that you are most commonly asked to do with variable and numerical expressions is to simplify or to evaluate them, okay? So let's talk about what that word evaluate means. Evaluate simply means to substitute the variable with the given number and work the problem, okay? Or substitute is just a fancy word for plug in. You're going to plug in the number for the variable, okay? And one really, really, really important thing that you need to make sure you remember, as I know it's been a while since we've talked about it, but it's super important that we continue to remember to use order of operations, okay? So remembering that order of operations is PIM, DOS, okay? Parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, and addition and subtraction, left to right, okay? So if we were to come down here to these variable expressions and the problem asks us to evaluate, look at number 1. It says evaluate n plus 7 for n equals 3. So that means we are going to take the 3 and we're going to plug it in. And actually, guys, that's different than what you have on your sheet. So you should have n minus negative 7. So let me adjust that. This should be n minus negative 7. And so if we take 3 and we plug it in for n, we're going to rewrite this and put 3 minus negative 7. And then we're just going to use order of operations and simplify. 3 minus negative 7. Remember, minus a negative changes to plus a positive. So that would be 3 plus 7, which is 10. Okay? So for each of these, you're going to take that value, plug it in, and then use order of operations to simplify. Okay? So just to recap, a variable can be a letter that holds the place of something, and that's what we're seeing here. Is these variables actually hold the place of a number, and we're going to plug that number in. A constant is a number that does not change. Numerical expression contains numbers and operations. Variable expression contains numbers, variables, and operations. Okay? And as you evaluate these expressions, you're simply plugging numbers in to solve, and you're using order of operations to help you. Okay? So you can start on the practice problems and check the key as you work through them. And we'll go over these when you come to my station. All right. Good job, guys. Peace out, Rainbow Trout. Love you, Mina.